There is a bit of a meme in the mini painting community, or rather in a lot of hobbies, that we tend to buy a lot of stuff to work on, to do our hobby, and then never really get around to it. In the mini painting hobby, that means buying models and then not painting them. But some of the time, having a wide variety of models that you have and can jump in to paint at any point that you like might actually be a good thing, because you start a new game and you want something that matches, something to kit bash perhaps, that sort of thing. And so having a supply of models, a reasonable quantity, is quite sensible. And so I don't want to focus on the pile of shame, that kind of insistence that you have to paint everything that you have and you're not allowed to buy more stuff until you've done that, but rather to have the variety of stuff ready to go at any point. And so I prefer to call it a pile of opportunity, because every model, all of these unpainted models down here, every single one of those is an opportunity for a model that I could paint at any point. And over the last year, I have been. In fact, over the last several years, I have been keeping a track of all of the models that I own that I haven't painted, my pile of opportunity. And each year I kind of drag everything out, count them all up, work out what I've got, and the number keeps going up because I keep buying stuff, more stuff than I paint. However, last year I came up with a little bit of an idea, a way of doing things differently, rather than just dragging everything out and counting it all and then shoving it all back away. I said something very silly like this. And therefore, I have a deal. In the coming year, I will make notes of every model that I paint and every model that I acquire by any means. I will only acquire one new model for every 2 that I paint. Now, at the time, I thought that was a really good idea, but maybe it wasn't. It turns out to have been quite a long process. Well, it's taken a whole year, but quite an involved process over the year to keep track of all of the models that I acquire. And I originally was thinking I'll just kind of keep track of the ones that I'm buying, but I actually wanted to also include the 3D prints that I make, the prizes I won at the local tournaments, if any. Anytime someone gives me a gift of a model, which doesn't happen very often, but every now and again it's nice, and I should include that as well. And this is probably going to be quite a long video because I'm going to go through every single one. I'm not going to bring out every single model and show them off, but I'm going to list out all of the models that I've acquired just so that I can keep track of what I've been doing in my hobby. Let's have a look at the first couple of weeks, because I started in the middle of December and this last year, and then this year I'm going to end in the middle of December. And so the first month and the last month are actually going to be just a couple of weeks that combine. The first December, half month, obviously painted the bunnies in a trench coat. The post-apocalyptic lady, who's definitely not a bunch of rabbits in a trench coat. That was in my pile of opportunity video from last year. That was the first one I painted after I did the count, kind of during the filming of that video. So that's a good start there. There's also a Western Objective model. Whether that counts as a model or kind of gaming paraphernalia, we can argue that in the comments below. The last of my Soviet infantry, I've got 6.5 marked down. I've started doing 0.5s because I'd already painted, this is the Katyusha, the 0.5, and I'd already painted the truck previously, but I painted up the rocket rails. So that completed the Katyusha. Also for the Western stuff is a snake, and I painted one of my Cromwells. So in the first few weeks I got off to a good start with 10.5 painted models. And how many did I acquire during this time? Well, according to my list here, I did 3D print a few, and I haven't been very good kind of keeping notes on what I'm 3D printing. It's just that I've printed 2 models. Maybe not helpful. I can show a picture of a bottle of resin if that helps. I did receive a couple of gifts. The Manchester Nerfer sent me an M3 half-track. This was the old Airfix kit. He also gave me a limited edition, I'm not sure if it's limited edition or just a alternate version of Luke Skywalker from Star Wars Legion. And at the local tournament, I won a limited edition, this was a limited edition Stanley Hollis model. And so that, in those first few weeks, is 5. And 10.5 is more than double 5. And so for the first few weeks, everything was going well, and I was doing my 2-to-1 ratio. But could I keep that up for a full month? Let's have a look at what January has to offer. So in terms of the painted models, it's actually really quick to talk through. I've got 24 of my British models for bolt action. There was also the M3 Stuart, also for bolt action. That's for my Americans with the alternate turret that I came up with. And I did do a video on that model, so plenty of information out there already. The War Machine Gun Mage, I believe it's War Machine is the game it comes from. And that's the one I painted during my Q&A in January, which was kind of a fun thing, and I should do that again at some point, maybe in a few months if people are interested in that. And so that is 26 models, and it's just mostly those Brit models there. However, when it comes to the acquisitions in January, there was one that was a gift. This is the 251 Stummel from the local tournament. And then the Star Wars Legion starter set, the Endor starter set, which has a whole bunch of stormtroopers and a whole bunch of the rebels from the Endor raid. 33 models, which means that to balance that out in my 2-to-1 ratio, I need to paint 66 models to keep that in order. But that does mean that my total for January of acquired models is 34. So 26 painted versus 34 acquired. That is well below, not just 2-to-1, but actually below 1-to-1. Moving on to February is much more interesting because we'll see there's quite a few models that I acquire and then I paint it in the next month or 2 or 3 months later. But this is the first time that on the list that there's a model I acquired, or in this case 3D printed, and then painted within the same month. And this is the Chernobyl ISU 152. I found these really cool when I was looking at pictures of the Chernobyl incident, the exclusion zone, and all of the artifacts that have been kind of immortalized by being in this place where generally people can't go, or certainly not in numbers. These vehicles have quite a bit of history to them as well, because they were used as... They were originally brought in to blow holes in the nuclear reactor so that they could gain access to, like, through walls and stuff. Thankfully, that didn't happen. It was an option. They brought them in just as an option, but because they got brought in, they ended up being used essentially as tractors, because once you take the gun off a tank, it's just a big tractor, a big armoured tractor. But these vehicles ended up contaminating. They got dumped in the zone. There is a video on this particular model, and so I should probably stop nattering and talk about the other models that I painted this month. I did mention Star Wars Legion. Well, the Stormtroopers, there are 16 of them that I painted. That's 2 squads of 7 on foot and the 2 jet bikes. There's also in my painted collection for this month 5 Italians. Now I believe these were the metal Italians that I got. I don't remember exactly where they all came from, but some of them came from a bundle I found on eBay of just a bunch of different heads from various bolt action sets, and I wanted the Brody helmet for my British, and it came with a couple of Italians, and so I painted them up, and suddenly I really enjoyed painting them because I painted them in different colours. I painted this nice bright blue shirt, and so I very quickly decided, well, I'm going to have to do some more Italians because I'm going to experiment with the different colours rather than just all of my Soviets are dull and drab tan, all of my Americans are dull and drab green and brown. I actually do some bright, more interesting colours. And the last one here is another 0.5. I think this is the last 0.5. I decided to stop doing this kind of silliness. But it's the AT-RT from Star Wars Legion. It's the Rebel light vehicle. I painted the vehicle, but I didn't paint the rider, and so that's why I counted it as a 0.5. But that does bring my total for February to 22.5. And if we have a look through what I acquired, there's quite a bit less than that, which is good. So there's the Chernobyl ISU 152, as I mentioned. I printed that and painted it in the same month. There was also the Airspeeder. So this is the T-47 Airspeeder from Star Wars Legion. For anyone who doesn't know the specific vehicle I'm referring to, it's the one from the Battle of Hoth when Luke flies around the AT-AT's legs and trips it over. That little flying ship. I've always loved the design. It's got this really nice shape to it, but then when you look closely, it's got all the greebling and stuff. Star Wars has always done vehicle designs very well, and this is one of my favourites, so I wanted to add it. I don't know if it's any good in Star Wars Legion. I don't care. I wanted to paint it. I also got the M10 Tank Destroyer, and that was a prize from the local tournament. And Ratman, my friend from up north, we kind of bundled together for an order from Warlord Games, just to save on postage. And I bought the Renedra Ramshackle House. And this is one of those models that I've been looking at for ages, thinking that's really nice, and I want to see if I can find it on discounts, because I'm not really a terrain person. I don't do a lot of terrain. But in that order, we actually ended up with some free models from Warlord Games. One of them is the German armoured kind of special character, and the other one was one of the Italians, and this is them showing off the Warlord Resin Plus. They were making a big thing about it's CO cast, but it's their own specific mix of material using the CO cast machines. And even though they were free gifts kind of from Warlord as part of that order, I'm still counting them because I'm counting every single acquired model. And so in contrast to the 22.5 models that I painted, I've only acquired 6 in February. And so not only is that well ahead of my 2-to-1, that's almost 4-to-1. 24 would have been 4-to-1, so it's better than 3-to-1. So that was a really good month for my painting more that I acquire models. And so let's have a look at March. And March, and kind of on into April as well, I was not feeling particularly well. I'm not going to get into it here, but the numbers for March and April are going to be a little bit lower just because I wasn't feeling very well. In March, I painted a grand total of 2 models, which isn't a lot. However, they were slightly larger models, and both of them were acquired in February. It's the Ramshackle House from Renedra and the Airspeeder, and both of those look really good. I'm really happy with how both of these models came out. I did spend longer on them than I would spend on a 28mm. Just an infantry model wouldn't get a lot of my time, whereas these two got a lot more of my time, and I'm really happy that they came out as good as they did. When it comes to acquired models, there's 2 3D prints here. Again, I have no idea what they are, but there's also the cartoon Sherman Firefly that I won at the local tournament. But then, interestingly and strangely, I have a negative value for acquired models. And for anyone who watched my old podcast, you may remember that Ratman, my friend from up north, and me, we split the Blackstone Fortress set. So I ended up with a bunch of Blackstone Fortress. I got the most of the characters, and he got most of the monsters. However, I never really painted any of them. I always intended to. They were always kind of high up on my, I should probably paint these, down here in my pile of opportunity, but I never took the opportunity. But he found some friends up north that wanted to play, and so he grabbed all the character models back. We ended up with a few duplicates, eBay bundles and things like that, and so I do have a couple, but for the most part, they went, most of the Blackstone Fortress models went back up north for him to actually play the game. And because they were unpainted models that I am unacquiring, I'm counting these as a negative. And again, we can argue about this in the comments down below if you want. But it's minus 13 because 13 models went back up north. And so my total acquired models for March is minus 10, which seems strange, but hopefully that makes sense as to how that's turned out, the minus from those models, unpainted models leaving my possession. And so 2 models painted versus minus 10 models acquired. I think mathematically that's good, but it is a strange way that's turned out. Moving on to April, again, I said this is one of the smaller months. The first few will be the German armoured officer. There's actually 4 models that I did. So it's the German armoured officer, it comes with 2 assistants, and then there's that free model that Warlord sent of the armoured sergeant something or other, special character. I can't remember, I didn't read it. But there's four of those that I got painted up. There's also the AB-41 from my Italian army. Almost as soon as I got all of those kind of the metal infantry models that kind of bounced around. Not many of them, but I thought I'm going to have to do Italians at some point, and that'll be my next army. So I printed that out and painted that up. And so this is probably one of those 3D prints that wasn't mentioned what it was, but I printed it recently, kind of recently before then, and that's done. I actually thought it was an interesting way of painting. It was super simple, really accessible painting style to do modulation with the stipple brush. There's also the Firefly tank, the cartoon Sherman Firefly that I painted up. Building and painting that model was a lot of fun. That's a really nice kit. I do want to get some more from Meng, that's the company that made it, just because that's such a nice kit to build and paint. And there's also one Stalker model. I don't know which one because I didn't make any notes about which one it is. One of my kind of grubby wasteland walkers with a rusty old AK got painted at some point during April. But that does bring my total to 7 painted models. And if we have a look at the acquired models, there's only 3, and they were all 3D prints, and I haven't marked out which one's which. So again, hey look, a bottle of resin. Whichever ones they were, or whichever ones they were. It's quite possible that the AB-41, the Italian armoured car, was one of those. However, for April, 7-3, that beats my 2-to-1 ratio. Although the numbers are very small, so it's less significant when it comes to the whole year, it is still 2-to-1 for that month. Moving on to May, and those have been rookie numbers. Let's pump up those numbers. These are going to be quite a bit more. I mentioned several times during my Pile of Opportunity video last year that I was working on the American platoon for Bolt Action. I think I mentioned the word America or US or whatever 3 or 4 times during that video. And so finally in May, 4 months later, 5 months later, I finally actually painted up some Americans. And squad of 12, and that's just one of my original squads. I have since mixed up exactly which models go into which squad. They're not in that organisation anymore, but that's how I organised them for painting. So, or a squad of 12. There's also a shuttle, which is one of the Star Trek. That was an old 3D print. That's actually an FDM print, so it's a fairly low quality model, and so it got a low quality paint job as well. There's one here that just says truck painted. I think this might have been my Studebaker, which I painted up for my British as a Lend-Lease vehicle. And that was 3D printed, so it's probably one of the 3D prints that we mentioned earlier. There's also, for Bolt Action, is another Italian. Don't know which one. Again, it's probably one of the metal ones that I got, or it might actually be the CO-cast one from Warlord Games. One that probably is a 3D print from earlier is Trix the Robot Rider. This was a fun, quirky, silly model. But finally, for May, are the tiny racers. So back in the good old days, I used to play Battlefleet Gothic, and one of the units in there that I always wanted but never really knew how to actually make was the like system ships and the local converted civilian ships. And in the game of the scale of Battlefleet Gothic, individual ships like this are so small they're almost insignificant. They're slow cruise ships and freighters and stuff like that that are just not big enough to be significant. But the idea is that they get retrofitted with weapons and they just bundle together in a little squadron, and as a squadron they are just significant enough to be used as a single small ship. And so what you end up with is a base with lots of little stems to have lots of little ships. But many years later, when I did get a 3D printer, and this is my FDM machine first, I printed off a bunch of tiny little spaceships so that I could make one, and I never did because the quality of those prints, FDM printing down to the size that I'm talking about, just didn't really work, particularly on that machine. And so they kind of got bundled into a bag and forgotten about. But I've been working on my jet bike racing game, and I wanted to see if the rule set worked for different scales of things, such as very, very tiny models in a spaceship race. Think that episode of Voyager where they took the Delta Flyer off to go and enter a race. That sort of thing on the tabletop. And so I based a couple of them, and I painted them up, and that is where 8 of those from May, I got those painted. But that brings my total of painted models in May to 24, which is pretty good. My acquired models, however, is also a fairly large number. I acquired 2 Gaunt's Ghosts models. I'm not going to talk too much about them because I'm really looking forward to the video coming out. And even though I painted them in May, I really need to get that video sorted. It's not even halfway done, but I acquired those particular models for a particular video. There's also 2 3D printed models. Again, here's a bottle of resin. I don't know which ones they were. The ships, I have 2 ships that I acquired. These are a gift from Mini Paint Stop. Empire of Dust slave ship. There are 6 British models that I have acquired. That is basically just 1 sprue from Warlord Games. I believe I got the Commonwealth sprue. It's either the Commonwealth or the Inter-Allied sprue, whichever one it was, that has the Agal headdress, because I wanted to make some like long-range desert group with that kind of classic headdress that they adopted during World War II, and so I got that sprue to make up a couple of them. Now, I should mention here that the next kind of few models that I'm going to talk about are very small scale models. Rather, I counted these 15mm mortar teams as just 2. So each mortar team is a single model, and I'm going to base them up as 1 model, so it makes sense to do it that way. There's also a gift of some 6mm Napoleonic models from Nick, thank you very much. Those came in a few different bags, and I worked out that I would count those as 3. There's 3 packs. And the last model that I acquired in May is the Italian tank. This is the new Italeri Warlord kit that can make a Semavente or Caro Armato. I built it up as Caro Armato. I won that at the local tournament. And so that brings my total acquired models to 18. So painted 24 and acquired 18. It's not quite 2-to-1 ratio, but it is better than a 1-to-1 ratio, so acceptable. Still pretty good. And now we'll move on to June. 12 Americans. That's the Italian armoured carrier, armoured troop transport. There is 1 model here that's just called Speeder on my notes, and I really wish I'd have put some slightly better description about what that means, but I do actually remember this one. So this is another 3D print. It's a variant of Luke's land speeder from episode 4, Star Wars episode 4. It's not exactly the same, it's got different engine arrangement, but it's a very similar vehicle to that. I'm probably going to use it as terrain. Another 3D print was the Mantic Games Armada Blood Runner. So the next one's on the list. I almost want to cheat and call these multiple models painted, because I've split the model up and painted them separately, but that feels a little like cheating. And so my Caro Armato Italian tank, the M1441, and the spare parts that would have made it the Semavente, I built the Semavente bits up as a weapons emplacement. Put it on a little mound of polystyrene, some milliput over the top, just ground texture over that to make it look like a built-in defensive position rather than a vehicle gun. And so alongside the Protecto Caro that I painted this month, there's a few big Italian models coming along. And I've painted some Gaunt's Ghosts, and for anyone following me from the Gaunt's Ghost days, I've sort of finished that project, but there are a few more things that I need to do. I was hoping to do a few videos this year, but it's kind of hasn't really happened. I've been more focused on Bolt Action, but there is more Gaunt's Ghost cut stuff coming. 5 or 10 videos that I'll maybe do at some point, hopefully next year, maybe the year after. I'm not going to do them as a series, kind of blocking them out like I did previously. They're just going to come out as and when I finish stuff. Their next set is some Spitfires, which is for the Blood Red Skies games. I did a bunch of freehanding for the roundels, and I'm not really happy with how they came out because I apparently can't paint circles very well. But they're painted and they're ready for gaming. There's also Darth Vader from Star Wars Legion. I mentioned that I painted up all of the Stormtroopers pretty quickly, and that I did have trouble with the Rebels. You'll notice that none of the Rebels have shown, well, the AT-RT's shown up, but none of the infantry Rebels have shown up yet. But I do have Darth Vader painted. And then again, that gift from Manchester Nerfer is the mini half-track. So that's the old Airfix kit that was quite interesting to put together and build and paint. And so the grand total for June is 27. That's pretty good. 27 models painted in a month, including a tank and 2 vehicles and the Semavente kind of weapons emplacement that I didn't count, because that could have been 28 if I counted that twice. And so I'm pretty happy with how June came out. That's 27 models painted. How many, however, did I acquire? Well, the vast majority of what I acquired in this month is 11 3D printed models, which I didn't keep any kind of track over what they were. There was, in addition, another gifted model, and this is from Mini Paint Stock again, and she gave me the Fey Boar Cavalry from Bad Squiddo Games, and that's just fun. And so that is the total for this month is just 12. But painted 27 versus 12 painted, that is beating my 2-to-1 ratio. So we can see this is the halfway point through the year. Throughout the year so far, there's a few months where I've fallen behind the 2-to-1. There's 1 month where I fell behind the 1-to-1 even. But as a whole, I was doing pretty well with painted models. And at the halfway point, not exactly the halfway point, but somewhere in June, I was exactly 2-to-1. And I remember that because it's when I put the Gaunt's Ghost models in. Painted up 2 of the Gaunt's Ghost models, and that hit exactly my 2-to-1, and I was pretty happy with that. Halfway through the year, on goal, on target, ready to go. So, July. Whilst earlier I wasn't feeling very well, this is far more a case of just really a lot of work was going in at my actual job. YouTube's not my job. I get no money at all for making these videos. It's just a hobby for me. Big month at my real job, and so I had a little less time for my hobby. That happens, that's acceptable, as long as it doesn't continue forever and you get burned out, that's a problem. But in terms of the painted models, quite a few of these are my 3D prints that I mentioned earlier. But I painted up a Bureau from the Stalker computer games. I really want to do a kind of energy shield effect. For anyone who's played the Stalker games, they know that the Bureau has this kind of energy shield, kinetic shield that it puts up. There is an emu, because I want to do the Great Emu War and make some Australian troops. But I can't find any emu models. I found an ostrich, and that's what this is. It's an ostrich that I painted up as an emu. Ostriches and emus are very similar in appearance. They're not the same, they're similar. There's also 2 Zona models. These are from the Zona board game. I did videos on each of these. There is a universal carrier, that's for bolt action for my British. There's also some Stalker models. There's 1 Stalker and the Stalker accessories. I printed out some little things to be artifacts, just because I thought that would be a cool thing to have for various tabletop games in that kind of universe. There is the first of the 2 cowboy jet bikes, or the Western jet bike models. I don't remember which order I did them in, but I did do a video on painting the 2 of them up. And they again are going to my jet bike racing game. They have been play tested. These have seen some games now. And finally, another 3D print, and this is definitely one I printed in that 11 from the previous month because I really love this. It is a yokai, a Japanese spirit. Essentially, it's a lady in a kimono floating through the air. And it's a really nice model. I painted this model specifically when I did my my painting handle. Link in the description to that video because you might want to check that out, because I designed this for painting models. I can put a model on it, twist it around and hold it at any angle very comfortably. And the yokai was the model I painted in that, so in the description of that video you can find a link to the creator of that. But that does mean that my painted models for July is only 8, not a large number. And my acquired models for July is also a small model, and there's only one entry of 3 models, and these are some more Italians that I won at the local tournament. And so for July, 8 models painted, not a lot, but only 3 models acquired, which is also not a lot. But that means that I did achieve, in this month, my 2-to-1 ratio. Again, small numbers, so it's less significant for the whole year, but it counts for this month. Right, let's have a look at August. And again, we're bouncing back and forth between months with low numbers and months with high numbers. August has a lot of numbers, quite a lot. So 3 Italians straight away, and I'm pretty sure that's the forward observation team, because as soon as I got them, I wanted to paint them. There's also for bolt action, there's a lot of bolt action this month. There are 6 Germans, and these are the kind of the crew from the Hanomag, not the crew, the transport from the Hanomag. They're a squad being transported, so they're all sitting down. But I thought that if I made a nice little diorama with removable models, I could have them all sitting on a bench in a kind of behind a barricade or something. If I included a little bit of a bench in each of the model bases, they would actually make sense to use as a small infantry squad by themselves. There's also 6 American models. Don't know which ones specifically. Probably stragglers from the previous squads. There is 11 British, so it'd be the 6 from that sprue that I bought, and then the last stragglers from individual models as well. There is the Cowgirl jet bike, the second of the Western ones, the Western science fiction Wild West Exodus game jet bikes that I got. And there's also, again, bolt action, some 8 Americans. Strangely enough, I've got Americans listed twice here. I've got 6 and then 8. So I don't know how that happened. I could have mushed those together. But what it does mean that in total, painting all of these squads of bolt action, the total for August is 36. That's pretty good. That's quite a lot painted. And mostly it's because I'm speed painting infantry squads. Not speed paints, but I'm painting quickly infantry squads. I really wish companies would stop stealing the names that we use in our hobby to make products. Annoying. But the acquired models are also quite a large number in August, and we start with a pair of models in 1/35 scale, or at least I think they're 1/35. They're certainly about 1/35 scale. There's also, counted as 0, which will make sense, a Churchill, and I won this in the local tournament again. But the reason why it's counted as 0 is because I immediately gave it away to Ratman. Because I have loads of British tanks, but I've got 5 tanks. I don't need a Churchill as well. And the Churchill's a cool tank. It's kind of that classic British tank, British heavy tank. Ratman is starting up a British platoon. We managed to trick him into starting an American platoon by letting him win some Americans at the tournament when he came down, which is kind of funny. And so now he's won some British models as well, and I've given him a Churchill. So sucks to be you. And he got a free sprue of British from Warlord Games because he made an order from them as well. And it's just funny how this is how they get you. You get some free models and you have to build it into a full platoon. However, the biggest number in August for acquired models, when Ratman came down, he spotted on the shelf of the local gaming shop a board game with all of the accessories, all of the expansion packs for Firefly. Now, I'd seen it on the shelf before, and I thought that there were 3 expansion packs and there was only 2 on the shelf. But when we were there, Ratman looked it up, and it was like, no, they never released that 3rd set. It was like a Kickstarter thing that they'd planned out some stuff, and they never actually released it. But if you buy the main box and the 2 expansions that were there, you get all of the crew, but you don't get a lot of the enemies. And it's like, well, the crew are the cool part. You can use any model to be like some Western bad guy, space Western bad guy, but the actual crew are the important part, and all of the crew were there, all 9 of them. And when it came to the till, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to buy these rather than splitting it 50-50 or any silly stuff like that. I'm just going to buy them and I'm going to have them, and we'll play the game eventually. But between us, it's our game between us, but the models are mine, so I'm counting all of the models on my list for this year, which is painful because there are 28 models, bringing the total for August to 30 models acquired. 36 painted, 30 models acquired, not 2-to-1 by a long way, but just scraping through on the 1-to-1. So still an acceptable result. Moving on to September, as we finally get towards the end of the year. So there's some Italian vehicles. The Italian Colonial is a staff car. There's a squad of 10 Germans. I'm practicing with the uniform colours. I want to change it just a bit, maybe darken it. There's one British model and one American model, just the stragglers, the leftovers from previous months. Oddly, there's one here that just says spaceship, and I don't remember which model this is specifically. And that's strange, because I don't paint many spaceships, and to have forgotten which one it is, again, I wish I'd made better notes. There is one 3D print here, and that is Alice in Wonderland. This is off of the old printer, so it's not particularly finely kind of printed model. The character design of Alice, particularly the American McGee's Alice, is so strong that you sort of don't need to paint a lot of detail to recognize the character. Whilst I finished off building my American models, on the US Marine sprue from Warlord Games, there is a flat cap. It doesn't really sell the American soldier to me. Rather, it kind of felt to me like a dockyard worker, and so I built up one of the US Marines from that sprue as a dockyard worker with a shotgun, and then I painted him up, not in the greens and browns, but in just normal civilian clothes. And yeah, that's your Union man, that's your dockyard worker who's got a shotgun, and that's a model that could easily be used in like 1920s Call of Cthulhu. That was the vibe I was going for there. And I think that's everything from this month, and so that total is 17 models. Now 17 isn't a terrible number, but it all matters about whether it compares to my acquired models. Here is a 3D print, and I actually have put notes about which one it is. Amazing! So this is a 3D print of the Colonial, and it's the Italian Colonial staff car that I painted in this month. The biggest set from this month is 16 models acquired from the Warlord Open Day, because we went to the Warlord Games Open Day, and they gave, I think it was a sprue of American Airborne on the way in, and then they also had a build along session where they gave another sprue of American Marines. So you got Marines and you got Airborne, 6 of each. It's 12. And then on the tour, it's like, well, let's have a look at the metal casting, and here's a free metal model, and let's have a look at the CO cast, and here's a free CO cast. And it all added up, and bits and stuff. And I think there was also the there was the limited edition Desmond Doss model, which is really cool. And so it ended up totaling to 16 models. I would say free, but they're kind of included in the price of entry, with 17 models acquired, because of the 16 of them at Warlord Open Day, is actually exactly the same as the 17 that I painted. And so painted versus acquired is exactly 1-to-1. So for October, I have a few interesting things. I do need to mention the one part of the acquired models first, and then I'll talk about the painted models. And that's because over the course of the year, you may have noticed me mention Italians a lot. I've got the Italian forward observation team, I've got the Italian ones that I got in that eBay lot, I've got the Italian vehicles, I've got some 3D prints, and I have intended to build up a full army of Italians, full platoon, 30, 40 infantry, all the vehicles that I've got, that kind of thing. The same as my other factions. However, I was sort of putting off buying any, because as soon as I buy 30 Italians, if I'm to get 2-to-1, that means I need to paint 60 models to balance them out. And so I was sort of dragging my feet on them because of this challenge. Several people ended up with free sprues of Italians from Warlord Games to say, oh, thank you for your order, here's some Italians. By the way, we're doing Italians now. Ratman gave me a sprue, and Elliot as well, in the local group, he gave me a few sprues. I ended up with 4 sprues, so that's 24 acquired, and we'll mention the acquired models later. But immediately I built up a squad of Bersaglieri, with the fancy pith helmet with the big plume on the side. They look great, and I painted those straight away. There's also another Italian, just one Italian mentioned here, and I don't know which one it is. It might be the Lieutenant, but whichever one it is, there's another Italian. So there's 12 Italians in total. There's also the very last British model, that's Stanley Hollis, the limited edition model, and one that I've just listed as Adventurer. So similarly to previously I mentioned, I got the Dockyard Worker that I made from the American Marine sprue. I also kit bashed up from various sprues a 1920s kind of safari adventurer look. So the body is from the British 8th Army. One of the arms is German because he's got the Mauser C96 pistol with the stock, very nice. It's either the German or the South African. I think it's the South African head with the pith helmet. I actually built this up before I got the Bersaglieri because sanding down the plume and having just that would have been, the shape of that helmet is a little nicer. But the helmet I actually used on this model is pretty cool. Kind of painted him in the greens because I wanted to give that that paint job some practice, because I was intending to paint my Italians in this scheme. I ended up not doing that. And the very last one in painted for October is the US Armored Infantry. So this is 3 models of the officer and 2 assistants, and then 5 models from the half squad of armored infantry that comes with the American starter set for Conflict 47. Really enjoyed painting them. I just really do enjoy painting the Conflict 47 armored officers. But I think that is everything. That is 22 models painted in October, which is pretty good. Now, I mentioned in terms of acquired models that 24, and already that's not good because 22 models painted and I got 24 Italians given to me. These were gifts, but I'm still counting them as models acquired. So that's 24 models acquired there. There's a truck for my Italians. That was just a 3D print. And then there's the tractor bikes for Conflict 47. Again, those are for the Americans. Those are cool. I 3D printed up the tractor bikes and part of the riders, and then the arms and heads of them were plastic. But that brings the total acquired models to 31 for October, which means that largely because of those Italians, not only did I not get the 2-to-1, I actually fell below 1-to-1. Less than ideal. 31 models acquired versus 22, so that's 9 less. But in terms of the 2-to-1, I would have to have painted 62 to balance out the 31 acquired. Yeah, 40 models behind. Sort of to balance that out, I ended up thinking, well, how do I paint a lot of models very easily? And when I moved into November, that's really where my head was at. It's coming up to the end of the year, and I've got all of these kind of stacked up, the last bits to hit the 2-to-1 from each month. I've got them all stacking up. So I need to paint a whole bunch of models. But I've also actually got a whole bunch of models that are halfway painted. So what I can do is just roll through some of the stuff that I've got half painted, but also paint some infantry squads that I could paint up fairly easily, not spending too much time in. And when it came to November, I got a massive number for painted models, the biggest of the whole year. And so let's have a look at the ones that I painted in November. There is Americans 12, that's the last infantry squad done, and Americans 11, and these are the dregs, the separate models. And mixed up between these two is actually all of the free models that we got from World Games. The Marines, the US, and Desmond Doss, and the others. Medium machine gun team, there's a mortar, there's my chaplain, there's my medic, and Desmond Doss and the other medic. Well, that's 23 Americans straight away. That's better than a lot of the months just there. But wait, there's more. I have a 3D printed truck for my Italians, the Fiat 626. I have a howitzer that I painted for my Italians. Oh wait, no, there's more Americans that I should mention. I did a video recently, one that I really enjoyed doing, of the American track bikes, the French Lehetra tractor cycle. Kind of like a bike, but instead of 2 wheels, it's got a single run of track, Caterpillar track. It looks really cool. There's also some models which I sort of painted I started painting these in the previous year and then put them aside, and then I got back to them this year and then put them aside again, and that went back and forth. But I realized in November, if I'm to get my 2-to-1, if I'm to get right up to as many models as I could paint, it would be a lot less effort to finish off painting the 14 models of the Daughters of the Motherland. The reason why these went back and forth is because of the real world stuff that's been going on in the East. I'm sure that if I mention it even slightly, then this video will just get shadow banned, because that's the kind of thing that YouTube does. So I won't mention it too much, but it should be fairly obvious. I wanted to do these as a video, but yeah, just the real modern war. Painting models should be fun, and it should be talking about history and learning about that kind of stuff, and not talking about stuff that's actually going on right now. So that put a downer on it, but I did get them painted, and just in the context of painting models, I really did like painting these bright red cloaks, or kind of greatcoats that fit the lore, not the history, but the lore of these characters, because they are obviously Conflict 47. It's that alternate history, and on top of that, there is a second Italian squad. So I painted up the Bersaglieri in the previous month, and this time I painted up the 11. So all of those free models that I got, even though they're counting against me quite heavily, I got them all painted. So in terms of 1-to-1, just those Italians, they're all done. Everything that I've acquired, I've painted. But I do need to balance them out with an equal number of other models. But what that does do is that brings my November to 56 models. And a lot of that comes from big squads. 11 Italians, 12 and 11 and 6 Americans, and the 14 Daughters of Motherland. Big squads that I'm painting up. Some of these are kind of little bits here and there over the course of the year. Some of them are just me sitting down and getting them done. None of these are particularly finely painted. These are not display models that I'm painting. These are gaming pieces. Even if I'm batch painting wargaming models, 56 is a lot, and I'm pretty happy with that. And none of these models are badly painted. They're just simply painted, and so I'm pretty happy with how they've come out. When it comes to acquired models, a very small number, particularly in comparison to the number of models that I painted. So I won at the local tournament the Red Cap limited edition model from Warlord Games. Strangely enough, Mini Paint Stop walked past a Games Workshop, and they do a free model every month, and she managed to get one for me, which is nice. I don't really do Games Workshop stuff very much anymore, but every now and again I do, and if it's free, that's nice too. It's a kind of a nice model, so I do want to paint it up at some point. And then again, with me mentioning 3D printing and not actually listing which one it is, there are 3 3D printed models, which means my total for November acquired is 5. 56 painted versus 5 acquired. Not only is that 1-to-1, not only is that 2-to-1, that's 11-to-1. That is my best ratio of the whole year. And 56 models is also a very large number, the largest of the whole year. So I definitely put in the effort at the end, got a bunch of squads painted just to bump up those numbers as best I could. Okay, so I've had the last few weeks of December, and I recorded this separately because I thought I was just going to say, it's just been 2 weeks at the end, I'm not really buying anything, I'm not really painting anything because I'm editing this video. But the thing is, once you start painting, and particularly with November's massive result, what was November, 56 models? Once you're in the habit of painting, you just kind of keep going. And so, the 2 weeks, the half month of December, we've had our first half month at the beginning of the year, last December, a year ago. And now we've had the second half of the first half of this December, ending the year. So I'm deciding that right now, right today, is the end of my year. The first things that I painted in the last few weeks were some more Italians. I said that I had painted all my Italians. Well, apparently Psych, I was wrong. I think I kept a few back on the sprue. I had a plan for something and I forgot what that plan was, and so I dragged those 3 out, built them up, because I then had a different plan to paint them in a different paint scheme. Doesn't really work as well as some of the others. They look alright. It's just 3 of them, they can knock around in various squads. But I also painted a donkey, or a pack mule, and this will be ammunition carrier for the howitzer that I did last month. Technically you can take pack animals as a separate unit to tow the vehicle, but I think just as it's the one donkey, I think I'll just use this as a crew figure, or almost just as it's carrying the ammunition around. The final one for bolt action for this year is the Crusader. Now this is a 3D print that I did in November. It's actually something that I mentioned in my Warlord Games £50 imaginary shopping list challenge, and whilst some people have said that there's a nice Rubicon model kit, I had already, even before that video went up, I had built and painted and used in a game a 3D printed Crusader. So I've got that vehicle now and it's all painted, ready to go. Another 3D printed model, though this one's been sitting around for a while, is a fire skull. I'm not sure exactly what this model is, but it's a D&D enemy, or kind of a screaming skull, or a mystical being of some description. I printed off ages and ages and ages ago, maybe not even this year, but I decided that I would, because of a model I'm about to show in a moment, I wanted to practice painting fire on a model. And so I painted this one up, and it looks alright. I've learned some stuff, and so going into the model I want to paint for fire, I'll have a better chance. There's also, going back to World War II, although not bolt action, the Victory at Sea starter set. This is something I got at Warlord Games, not in this recent year, but the year before, and I painted the entire set. So there's 6 Japanese ships and 9 American ships, so there's 15 in total. I made my own custom dark blue wash for the sea, and so while the ships themselves aren't amazingly painted, the sea with a gloss blue paint as the wash looks really good, and I'm actually surprisingly happy with how the sea came out more than how the actual ships themselves, although the ships do look pretty tidy themselves. And then the final one, again, it's one of these objectives and accessories bits, kind of a bundle of stuff, and they're still on my painting desk because I have just finished them today. But these are some objective markers for my Tanith First and Only. I'll be doing a little video on these at some point fairly soon, I hope. So look out for that. Except there is one more I have to mention, and that is the Sherman that I painted on my live streams over the course of this year, and I finished it recently. But I can't remember exactly when I finished it, and I didn't mark it anywhere on my notes. And I've realised that it's missing, and so I've added it into December because I don't know where it should belong. And I didn't. And I finished. I'm not going to re-record a month just to slot it in, even if I did know. So I'm going to add it in on December, even though I painted it previously. And so with that as well, the 2 weeks of December totals 23 painted models. And that is not bad for a half month. That's actually better than quite a few of the full months in some cases. Yeah, so getting stuck in. And granted, most of that is the ships from Victory at Sea. But hey, a model's a model. That counts. For the acquired models, again, I did say that, hey, it's the end of the year. It's only 2 weeks. It's a half month. I'm probably not going to buy anything. I'm probably not going to acquire anything. Not going to print anything. Well, just like I wasn't going to paint anything, didn't happen. I wasn't going to acquire anything, also didn't happen. Now, there's 2 things to mention from the local tournament as prizes, but I get to not count one of them, which is nice, because that is the Major Koenig Special Edition model, the German sniper from Enemy at the Gates. I already have this model, and so I gave it away to a friend of mine who I'm trying to get into bolt action. But yeah, I'm counting that as a 0, similar to the Churchill earlier, because I won it. I acquired it, but then I unacquired it by giving it away. In addition, at the same event, I won the Chiha Japanese tank, and that definitely counts as an acquired model. I will be painting that, but not this year. And the final model, which I've been holding throughout this whole section of recording, because it's very lovely, my favourite model at the moment, and I can't wait to get some paint on it. This is the Gakota Skylord from Mantic Games. For anyone who watched my £50 challenge for Mantic Games, the kind of speculative shopping list, this model was one that I just kept talking around and I just loved it, and so I had to get it. A friend of the channel decided to get an order. They wanted the free shipping, and they said, well, if I just bump up the price a little bit, I get the free shipping, so what do you want? And so I want this. And they said, that's a very expensive model. I'll buy you junk food the next time you come over, a takeaway of a particular company that does not sponsor the channel, so I won't mention them. And my friend agreed to this, so I will be buying horribly unhealthy food in exchange for this model. Well worth it, I think. It looks just as amazing in person as it did on the website, if not better. I can't wait to get stuck into this. Unfortunately, it doesn't count as a painted model, it does count as an acquired model. And so my acquired models for the half month of December, the second half month, which is the first half of the second, you know what I mean, is 2 models. And so we can have a look, finally, at long last, put this model down without knocking it over, like, sit, go, look, I'm just going to put it down and stop playing with it. So we can now finally look at the year as a whole, and we can get this ridiculously long video out of the way. And I'm not doing this next year because this is silly. But the total number of acquired models versus the total number of painted models, and my goal of getting 2-to-1, painting twice what I acquire, or my secondary goal of getting 1-to-1, as long as it's equal, I'm accepting that. The ultimate goal is to reduce it, and so that was my 2-to-1 aim. But as long as I get 1-to-1, I'm pretty happy, because that means at least it's not spiraling out of control. Well, my acquired models from all of the months and the half months is 156 models. And that seems like a lot at first, but it could be a lot worse. A lot of people in wargaming, if they pick up a starter set and some extra things, and then a few months later they pick up another starter set, and this kind of cycle. This is kind of what people are trying to fight with the whole pile of shame thing. Buying constant more sets, big sets, lots of models, bundle deals with hundreds of models sometimes. The fact that I've only acquired 156, that's not a terribly large amount. Could easily be 10 times that in some cases. And so my goal, my secondary goal of equal would be 156, of course, painted. And my 2-to-1 goal would be 312. So have I painted 312 models this year? Have I managed to get my ultimate goal of 2-to-1? Well, my total number of painted models this year, from a year ago to today, I have painted 279 models, which isn't quite 2-to-1, but is actually, I think, quite impressive compared to how I have painted before in previous years, and my style and just how I generally paint. I've painted a lot this year, and I think partially that is because of my challenge, this very 2-to-1 challenge that I've set out for myself. I've acquired less than I could. I could have 3D printed a whole bunch of stuff over the year, bought a few sets. There's actually a starter set that I've been eyeing, and there's some sprues and individual models that I've been looking at but not buying. And when it comes to painting, I'm definitely leaning towards painting a lot of stuff for bolt action particularly, but also just what else can I pick up and just get some paint on. And it's got to the point, particularly by the end of the year, where I'm just in the habit of painting. And so even when I'm not painting on video, I'm not painting for For Bot Action specifically, I'm just keeping going, picking up some interesting models, having a look at what's all the way down this bookshelf and just picking up something and painting it. And that is the important part of a pile of opportunity, because you have all of this opportunity for all of these models that you could paint, but it's only an opportunity if you take the opportunity, and this year I have. I'm going to talk through some stats, some numbers. Some of this is guesswork, but some of this I do have written down. And yeah, one of the things, even though I didn't get the 2-to-1, so my goal would have been 312. And my actual numbers was 279, which means it's about 33 models short. And so that means I'm 10% short of my goal. 1-to-1 would have been 50% of that. And so I'm 40% ahead of my secondary objective. So I'm far closer to 2-to-1 than 1-to-1. Of the 156 models that I've acquired this year, I've painted at least 100 of them. And so the vast majority, kind of 2/3 of the ones I'm acquiring, are models that I'm then painting, sometimes immediately, and in some cases chomping at the bit to get started on, because they're really cool. Probably airbrush first, because I think that's the best way to go, and then straight back up here for some more paint with a brush. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. This model is so nice. Look at it. It's so cool. And this is something I keep saying. Every year I keep saying this, but I finally have some approximate numbers, but numbers nonetheless, to show kind of what I mean. Having a pile of opportunity is good because you can dip into it, but banning yourself from buying new models until you can paint the old ones, that's just an unpleasant imposition on yourself. And what that does is that stops people painting. The new models that I'm getting, I'm kind of excited about. They're the ones that I really want, so I'm picking them out and not letting myself just buy absolutely everything. I'm picking the ones that I really want to buy, and they're exciting for me, and I'm painting them straight away. But that gets me in the habit of painting, and then I'm painting older stuff as well. And I'm looking at the older models and thinking, oh, there's this that I want to finish to complete this set, or there's these older models that I really liked, and I do still quite like them, so I'll pick them out and paint them. The bigger purchases or the bigger acquisitions from this year could very easily have turned the tide, and there are 4 what I consider big acquisitions, maybe 3, maybe 4, depends on how you count it. The Star Wars Legion starter set was 33 models, and so to balance that out I'd have to paint 66. The Firefly board game was 28, so again I'd have to balance that out with 54 models. The Italian sprues that I was given or swapped for was 24, so I'd have to paint 48. And the ones I got at the Warlord Open Day, there was 16, which means I'd have to paint 32. Now I was 33 models short of my 2-to-1 challenge this year, and so any one of those I might have passed. I might have got through my 2-to-1 challenge, but I also painted all of the Italians and half of the Star Wars Legion set. I haven't painted any of the Firefly set. I really need to drag that out and get some of them painted. Remind me of that in the future. But that sort of leans into something that I've had in the back of my mind the whole year. When I'm looking at models that I'm buying, I do have this 2-to-1 challenge in my mind. Whilst I've not totally been, oh, I can't buy anything, I'm not allowed to buy anything until I paint some more stuff. When I look at the bigger sets, I've been putting them off. I've been leaving them to kind of, maybe I'll do it next month, or maybe I'll do it in a few months' time, or maybe I'll even leave it till next year when I have a different challenge. But on the other hand, I got the Star Wars Legion set and immediately got stuck into painting it. The Italian sprues turned up and I immediately painted them all, and all of the other Italians that I managed to drag out. I'm not convinced that psychologically I would have actually behaved in a linear fashion. Getting the new models makes me paint, so not getting the models may have actually made the year worse, perchance. I don't know. My total Italian models painted is 37, or thereabouts. Similarly, the Americans, and last year I specifically mentioned the Americans as being the big project that I should start the year off. Now, I didn't get those done at the beginning of the year, but I have now painted all of my Americans. 77 models, 77 Americans I've painted this year. And so I think that, if nothing else, is pretty successful. I mentioned that was a kind of an ancillary target to achieve this year, and I've completely smashed it. When I mentioned the Gaunt's Ghosts the year before then, I got a bunch of Gaunt's Ghosts painted in that year, but I didn't finish them off. Whereas with the Americans, I finished them off. And also I finished my Brits off as well at the very beginning of the year. And so maybe some of the stuff I need to do in the next year coming up is to go back and finish off my Gaunt's Ghosts. There's just a few of them hanging around, and I could rattle them off in a couple of weeks probably. And maybe there are some other sets in my collection back there, the Stalker models perhaps. Get them all done. I even have some orcs from 20 years ago, and the stuff from Bad Squiddo, and there's some science fiction. There's a lot of stuff. We've been through this before. So let's just move on before I get distracted again. Of the 150 that I acquired, I've bought, like straight up paid money for, about 75, so it's about half. 30-ish 3D prints, and then of course the 24 Italians, plus some other gifts and the prizes from the local tournament. It takes me up to 156. But the straight up bought for money, either in the local shop or online or whatever, is about half of my acquisitions. And that seems interesting to me, but I'm not sure why. I need to think that through, I guess. On the subject of 3D prints, between a close friend and myself, we've got the Mantic Vault, or not every month, we've got quite a few months from the Mantic Vault, and I've been printing off a whole bunch of stuff for them. Basically every STL that we've got I've printed for them, but I haven't printed any for myself. The Mantic Vault is really cool, and certainly if you play Kings of War Armada, nearly the entire collection is up there now. But partly that is because I got a new printer a few months back. My old printer was a gift from Ratman up north, but it was a fairly poor quality printer. It had a few design issues, designs that were chosen to make it cheaper to produce rather than to make it work better. And so it worked, but it didn't work amazingly well. And eventually it got to the point where I just had to get rid of it and start again with a much nicer printer. And so we got a much nicer printer, but I haven't really run it that much. I've printed more for other people than I have for myself. Like I said, my friend that I've printed the Mantic stuff, and my friend from the local games who gave me the Italians, I printed off some bolt action vehicles for them. I haven't really printed much for myself. There's every now and again through the year there has been, and I did that Crusader recently as well. And when it comes to the counting, both in terms of acquired and painting, I just have a note here that says, "Did I cheat?" ? And I probably have in places. Certainly when it comes to the very small models, things like the 3mm Napoleonics, if I counted every single individual 3mm cavalry model as its own separate model, well, that would have destroyed my year's supply. Even if I painted them, I would have to then paint 30 other models. I don't actually know how many there are. Counting them as units, as a single model, because that's about the amount of work that a single 28mm model would be, made sense. There's also some split models that I might have smudged here or there. The Karaamato is a good example because I split that into, like, I counted that as one acquisition. The Karaamato box, that's one model that I've acquired. But I've painted the Karaamato tank. I've painted the defensive building that I made out of the Semovente parts, and I've painted the tank commander as a separate model as well, so it's 3 separate models. I really shouldn't be counting them as 3 separate models if I've only counted them as 1 acquired. I should count them as 3 acquired and 3 painted. And then there very well might be times where I've assembled some bits together out of the bits box where I haven't counted those parts as models in previous years or in this year if I've printed like a torso. And so I've managed to get a new model without marking it as an acquired model. And there's also it just says prints missed on my notes here, and that's probably also likely. It's certainly close, but I can immediately have a look at what I'm looking forward to and what I want to do next year, because I'm already kind of in the swing of painting. And I'm going to mention this model again because it's very nice and lovely. I'll put it down. It's fine. But this is actually a good example of one of the things that I want to do. I have painted a lot. Like in the last year, a lot of what I've painted has been boring, drab military models. However many Italians, however many British, however many... there were some Germans in there, and there's loads of Americans. These are all fairly boring military World War II models. I've enjoyed painting them, and I have certainly enjoyed playing the games with them. I also quite like to paint far more elaborate models. And in the coming year, I have the plans to actually paint, not necessarily competition standard or anything like that, but I want to push my skills. And so for models like this, and some of the other models over there, and some of the more models that I might be thinking about buying, I'm gonna try hard. I'm gonna put the effort in, one model at a time, and spend a lot longer, probably longer on one model than I have on whole squads of bolt action models. I do, however, want to pick up some more Italians to fill out to 1,000 points, but I also want to complete the set, almost as it were, of World War II bolt action factions with the Japanese army. But I have been putting off, because of the 2-to-1 challenge, I've been putting off the Japanese. Now that there's a new year started, now that I've got a new segment in my painting career, my painting hobby, I'm gonna pick up some Japanese, some more Italians. I think I've got plenty of Germans. I just need to get stuck into painting them. For next year, we might answer those questions and see how I got on with the Japanese, how I got on with these display models. I am not going to do a video like this one, because this has been silly. This has been a lot of work, even though some of my longer videos have been fairly successful. People do enjoy listening to this old man ramble, apparently. It takes so long to do. It's taken me 3 or 4 hours to record it, 10 to 20 hours to edit it, and I'm not a professional YouTuber. I have a real job to do, so I don't get a lot of time to do these videos, and that's kind of a shame. And so I want to go back to the way I've done it in the past, where I just drag out the unpainted models, and maybe I'll mention a few of the really nice models that I paint during the year, but I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on every single model painted and every single model acquired like I have today, because good grief, that was silly. Well then, I've run out of notes, thankfully, so we can wrap up the video. If there is anything you could possibly want to say, there is a comment section down below for you to say it. I keep mentioning that I like comments, not because of the all-holy YouTube algorithm, but rather just because I like to interact with people. And so if you have, perchance, any of these models down here that you'd like me to paint, anything that I've mentioned, some of the display models that I've got on the way, like this chap. Again, I've picked him up again because I just can't stop looking at him. It's such a nice model. There's also the jet bike racing game, which isn't necessarily about painting models. It's more about writing a rule system. I've play tested it a few times, and so I know the core gameplay is good fun. So you will hopefully be seeing some more of that this year. Models painted, because there are some jet bike models that I've got ready to go, but also in terms of actually talking about the game itself. Potentially could get published. I would like that to get published, and so that might be something that you can support me financially with. Other things you can support me financially with, if you care to, is donation link in the description if you want to just throw a one-off payment, but also the mini painting handle that I designed. These things that I use in a lot of my videos, which has rotational arms so that you can position models in any way that you want to and paint them at different angles. These are available as STLs to download. They're designed for FDM printing, but you can, of course, resin print them. What were my numbers? 156 models acquired, 279 painted. Now, what that means is, in theory, if my numbers have been accurate, which I'm pretty sure they're not perfectly accurate, but they're certainly close, my pile-up opportunity has been reduced this year by 123 models, which, according to my video from last year, is 515 models. If I reduce that by the 120 something, that would be just shy of 400, so that'd be 390-ish models. What should my challenge be for the coming year? Should it be to continue the painting of 2:1, although I won't be doing a video in the same way, because good grief, this has been a lot of work. But maybe I could do something different and actually let myself buy some of the larger sets. But how can I challenge myself to make sure that I'm still painting? I don't want to ban myself from buying models, because that just makes it not fun. What makes it fun is encouraging you to paint. And what's the best way of encouraging me to paint? Well, getting some new models every now and again encourages me to paint those, because they're cool and new and interesting, and that gets the ball rolling to paint some older stuff. So perhaps what I should say is that rather than 2:1, I should aim for 1:1. And so for every model I acquire, I have to paint one model to balance it out. But then also, in reverse of that, for every model I paint, I should acquire one more model. Maybe that's the challenge. Maybe there's a point where I say, I have painted quite a few models, and so I must print a new model or buy a new model, or maybe it fills up from gifts and the other things and the tournament wins and stuff like that. That seems very strange and very silly, but for the moment, let's go with that, and I'll check in with you next year and we'll see how that goes. Well, this has been a terribly long video, and it has taken me weeks to edit, but it is finally done. So if you liked it, please post a comment below so that we can have a chat about it. Talk about your collection at home. How have you managed to keep yourself painting? Because that's all I want to do, is encourage everyone to paint, because painting is fun. I'm going to go off because I need to finish editing this video, and then I want to go and paint this guy, because this guy is just so cool. I'm ED-SKaR, always will be. Thank you very much for watching.